remember Sputnik? Good, I heard about Sputnik. So, you know, the first satellite orbiting the world that basically jolted the Western world, right? Suddenly, Russia changed the parameters and the space race started. If you think about it, this is very much what Apple computers have done to design. Basically, suddenly everybody woke up and became aware that design is a very significant competitive advantage that can help you do very well on a lot of different levels. So today, I'm going to be talking about how design and business can be bridged and how you can quantify it and actually structure your process. So my first slide talks about, surprise, you can make money on design. So I did a study of companies that had won either gold, silver, bronze, or no award in IDSA's design award contest. And what's really interesting is that those companies were all very close and all very professional. So even the ones that applied and didn't get an award were top-notch design-driven companies. But even at that point, you could see that the ones that won the winning awards outperformed the companies that were very close by 6.5% annually in their stock value. So even at that level, there's a lot of money to be made in design. If you look at Apple computers, of course, and this is one of the places why the other graphs look so small compared to Apple computers. You know, they, of course, outperformed everybody else, right? They are definitely an abnormality. And the question is, and I wonder, asking you, does it make sense to copy Apple? Are Apple somebody you want to copy when you want to introduce design into your company? And of course, the answer is, it depends. So here are about 100 products from Apple Corporation throughout the last 30 years. And when you look at these products, not counting a couple of printers and cameras, most of them were so-and-so, right? About 7 of them changed and rocked the world. And 6 of them, you know, were dismal failures, and some of them nearly ruining the company. You know, when Steve came back, I think in '97, they were about 90 days from bankruptcy. So if your company is willing to take on this type of risk profile, if that's how you feel about risk, then by all means, look at copying Apple and doing something similar. I can tell you that Korean companies are not quite as comfortable with risk as Apple computers, so you might be somewhere in between, right? So this is what I'm going to be talking about today and what I'm going to be walking you through. So we're going to be talking about design-driven organizations first. So this is a study from the Danish Design Center in Denmark. So Danes love their design and are very proud of their design, no matter how old it is. And here they see a study from the government where they looked at how to use design. And I think they looked at about 13 to 700 Danish companies. And if you introduce design, if you don't use design, right, and send your revenue to index 100 at that point, and then look at introducing design as styling after the fact afterwards, your revenues actually drop by 10%. So never, ever hire an industrial designer after the fact. You will lose money, right? At least if you're a Danish company. So of course, it's not because the design consultancy is not doing a good job, right? It's because you're not communicating your business objective effectively, and you're not controlling the process very well. Then if you look at introducing design in the process, now you start making some of the money back you lost, right? So here you're looking at doing 9% better than not including design. So design as a part of the process is something that's going to help your revenues. And I don't know about you guys, but when you look at the top one, right? So integrating design in business innovation, you get an extra 1%. Doesn't that surprise you a little bit? I would think there would be way more money to get by better integration with business. And after talking with my friends, peers, colleagues, after this study came out, we kind of thought, you know what? This is probably an indicator of opportunities. They're just doing well enough, not doing well enough. And when we looked at 81 design briefs, we also found out that there was much more money to be found if you integrate design more effectively, strategically with business. So I like to encourage you to see this as an opportunity for you and the best companies to do even better. So one of the things that we've been advocating to create that integration, of course, is to get designers involved upfront early in the business definitions area. And here you can basically see talking about, business definition, direction, design development, and production, right? And if you look at bringing design in early on, they start learning early on. So if they start at the direction stage, there's a difference between the bottom one, which is their learning curve, and the top one, which is the decisions they're making, so the influence of the decision designers are making. And typically, when they are about 5 to 7% through the product development project, they make decisions for about 70 to 80% of the product cost, based on very little knowledge. So the idea, of course, is if you can get the designers to get in earlier and learn earlier, they have an earlier ramp up, and they will be more educated when they start spending your money and defining cost on the product. So we looked at how we actually be going to be doing this in the real world. I don't know how familiar you are with using design in your organizations and how you engage with designers, but here are a couple of opportunities. You can use design at 4 different levels. You can use design as an integrator, as a differentiator, so you're differentiating your product from others, either functional, aesthetics, or branding-wise. That's the lower rung. We call it design 1.0. Then you can take it up to the process level, 2.0. Then you can bring design into the coordinations of your functions and activities and your departments. So have design a part of an integrating function. That's the next level. And then, of course, the top level, put integrating design in your strategy. So that would be like Dyson, BMW, and Apple computers. Then there's, of course, different routes, different ways you can go about doing that, right? So at the lower level, you may be able to get away with crowdsourcing. You're crowdsourcing logos, business cards, letterheads, and so forth. But, it will only take you so far. Eventually, you will need to integrate it into the process, either by having a freelance designer or using a design consultancy. And of course, as you move up, you need more and more knowledge and more control. And the thing about it is, if you want to build design into your organization as a strategic component, you can't shortcut it. You basically need to have them from the beginning and make sure they understand the whole process. So the later you introduce it, the longer, of course, the learning curve is going to be for designers to add value at a strategic level. So this is the map we've been using for how to implement design and how to organizing innovations and innovation management. And as you can see, we're looking at all consulting models have 2 axes, right? It's always a matrix. So if you look at the bottom, you're looking at market risk. So basically, you can have a recognized need. So that's the one everybody knows about. You might be changing the color, the texture, or so far from the product. The next one is you're clarifying a need, something in a need that wasn't clear before. You're able to clarify and deliver a better product. And of course, the most risky part is realizing a new need. So realizing that people have a need for iPads, right? When I saw the iPad came out, I couldn't figure out why I needed it, but it was cool, so I got it anyway. So that would be a good example of that, right? Then you can use basically technology. You can use the technology that you're already using and continue developing or refining that one. Or you can bring in technology from other domains or businesses and basically cross-fertilize and get a new product. Or you can go all the way up and start developing your own products. And of course, as you move up that axis, your risk also increases. So look at it this way. 80 to 90% of products are down in the lower left corner, right? Incremental product development. And here you're looking at a risk of product failure of about 40%. And if you're up in the other area, your risk goes up dramatically. So imagine that you're multiplying 0.1 by 0.1. Whatever returns you're multiplying it with, the risk, suddenly it's 1% of the chance of actually getting that. So the risk goes up a lot. What we are focusing on in our research, because of course that's the area that's the least explored, is basically how do you bring design in breakthrough innovation as opposed to just incremental. So here is a good way of showing the payoff and how you could look at the world of risk taking. So you can be down in the lower left corner where it's incremental. And are you familiar with the red ocean concept? Blue ocean strategy. So basically, that's where the water is full of blood and where the sharks are chewing each other up, right? It's where the profit margins are spiraling downwards. And then as you move up to the other area, that's what I call kamikaze country. That's where only fools, friends, and family are dumb enough to invest in your projects. And of course, what we are looking at is nudging designers and business people to look at something in between. And I don't know if you thought about it, but you can't really work your way incrementally to greatness, to innovation, right? You can't be down in the safe area and take small steps towards breakthrough innovations. You need to leap. And what they found out at Stanford through 30 years of ME310 sponsored projects is that one of the ways of doing is what's called a black horse approach. Basically, you spend a certain amount of a one-year project, typically about 2 weeks, to explore something that's completely different. And you go all the way out. And then, of course, you start working your way back again. There are 3 advantages in that. So first of all, it helps building stronger teams, better team collaboration. And you know, your project is never going to be better than the team and how they work together. So that's one big advantage. The second advantage is the moment you start doing those kind of exploration is that you build new knowledge. If you're still working down in the lower area, right, you won't really build significant new knowledge. So you will get new knowledge. And then, of course, there is the off chance that you actually came up with the next breakthrough product. So I would encourage you to look at ways of how you can basically, you know, leap into and then slowly trade back. And the optimal area, believe it or not, is not where fools, friends, and family suggest you should be. It's much closer to home down the bottom. So let me move on to inspirational design briefing. So one of the objectives, of course, is to how to translate business objectives into actionable design criteria. So one of the things I heard a lot from designers when we started out researching was a lot of the information you get from marketing or from engineering is useless. So marketing is not understandable, and engineering is way too restraining. So how do you actually create a better briefing, a better brief between business and design? And what we've been leveraging here is what we call the 9 design quality criteria. And what is that? We basically looked at design awards worldwide, about 107, and looked at what are the characteristics of a design, what are the characteristic criteria for a design award. This is basically what the designers are promising that they can deliver to their stakeholders. And there are basically 9 categories. Let me walk you through them quickly. So there's the strategic components of the design quality criteria. So basically, the design philosophy, which is the interpretation, of course, of your business philosophy. Then under the strategy, you have structure, so that's your supply chain management and getting things through the internal structure of your organizations. That needs to be clear in the strategy, in the brief that the designers are using for their development. And then, of course, the third one is the innovation level. You want to make sure that you're in agreement about how innovative does this product need to be able to compete. Mostly, the management says it has to be all the way up here. But you really ask them to put it on a map, it kind of migrates downwards a little bit to a safer area. So those are the first 3 strategic ones. Then there are the contextual ones. And that's basically one you probably know from triple bottom line. So profit, people, planet, not necessarily in that order, but definitely balanced. So you need to make sure that you are taking care of social constraints, social needs, people, and a need. You want to make sure that you're taking care of your resourcing and acting responsibly. It will come back and haunt you if you don't. And then, of course, you have to make a profit. That is the lifeblood of your organization. And the reason we call it viability as opposed to profit, it indicates this is your ability to make money in the long run, not just the next quarter, of course. And the last 3 criteria are basically the performance or execution criteria. And here you're looking at the process, so describing to the designers how they're going to be developing it, or together with them developing it. Then you're going to be talking about what functionality the product actually needs, and then what kind of expressions you want the product to have. And The reason we use the word expression and not styling or aesthetic is it's a BMW thing. There's some kind of negative connotations associated with styling that is just like putting lipstick on a pig. So that's not the right way of doing it, right? That's the minus 10% in revenue. So really what you want to do with design is you want to make sure that the expression is integrated in your brief and is related to the other components. So let's look at the balance of your brief. I don't know if you thought about what a brief needs to look like. So a brief can't be 100 pages, right? Nobody's going to be reading 100 pages and remembering. So typically design briefs could be between 2 or 3 pages, 500 to 1,500 words. And they have different level of balance of these components. So let's talk a little bit about the trade-offs and the focus. So if you are communicating the expression from very little to a lot, right? And if you're looking at how much you need to communicate the process. So if you have a design philosophy and you know what the product is supposed to express, want to make sure that it's communicated clearly to the designers. Because if you don't, you basically need to spend more time on the process, right? And that means they need to spend more time looking for the solution. And when they need to spend more time looking, there's a bigger chance of going over budget, right? And although the initial phases of a design project, isn't a huge part of your budget, the fact that if you go over budget in the beginning, I don't know about you, but it gives managers a really bad taste in the mouth. And they kind of stop trusting that the team know what they're doing if they're already running over budget in the beginning. So that's why it's really important to stay up on budget when you're starting out. So basically, this graph tells you that if you are spending a lot of time communicating process and not giving them enough information about the expression criteria that they need to adhere to, you are running a severe risk of going over budget. Here you're looking at the balance of a brief according to the 9 design quality criteria. And as you can see here, often insufficient strategic information is communicated to the designers. And you can see if this is working with an external design consultancy, you might not want to give them all the strategic information because, but let's face it, they might work for your competitors sometimes in the future. And you might not want them to somehow migrate that into your competitors, right? At the same time, you need to be aware that the moment you do not give them sufficient strategic information, you're basically cutting 30% of their efficiency off. So that's cutting off 1 of 3 legs or 1 arm out of, yeah. So you're basically reducing their ability to perform their performance in innovationness, in profitability, basically drops by 30%, as opposed to if you communicate strategic criteria is important sufficiently. And then if you look at design expression criteria, so often you hear managers say, draw something, and when I see what I like, I'll let you know. And as you can see, that is definitely not a good strategy. You need to basically communicate as much as possible about this expression. In that way, you reduce the risk of going over budget by 60%. Is this something that sounds familiar to you? Is this something that you resonates? Good. So this is typically what a design brief would look like for, this is a fashion product. So we analyzed about 81 design briefs and found out that this is the distribution that makes most sense. So you want to make sure that your brief is brief, right? Has the right distribution of the various information segments, that it's sticky, people remember it, and that it's inspirational. So use language that inspires designers and not legal lingo instead. That's, for me, not very inspiring, at least.